I mean, I feel like I should address this a little bit because I did kind of make the submission, and I obviously have been approached by their councillors about it because they have this nostalgia about it, and they're not necessarily using our wonderful 1,800 buses that move through the CBD every day, so they're not aware that there is already a solution in place. It's just not free, and it's just not a yellow shuttle. So, yeah, I think my approach was, I've of course outlined that we, as a public transport authority, have scepticism over it. We don't see that there is a problem definition that needs to be solved, and the shuttle might not be the solution. But I did say there seems to be quite a political drive for this business case, for the return of this service, and the ball is in our court as to whether we really, our position on it, because ultimately we can say it won't be exempt from public transport, being a public transport service. So let's see if we've got any questions from the floor. Claire?
Can I just clarify? You just talked about you giving your a submission as you, but it was you presented on behalf of the council, wasn't it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And that was to their annual plan?
It was, yeah. And I outlined the points in our annual plan submission which said we weren't supportive. John?
Right, so just given my work with Ashburton and now starting to understand this stuff, so it would require a contract, it would require some consultation, and then a targeted rate, would it, to enable it, and then the fare box recovery and a whole bunch of things. How does that play into it? I've read the documents, but I just...
Yep, so through you, Mr Chair. So essentially what we're discussing here and what Christchurch City Council are looking for some feedback on is, does Environment Canterbury Council support a proposal to review the Central City Shuttle? So we don't know exactly what that model would look like. We assume it would need some level of subsidy, in which case it would need to be contracted through Environment Canterbury. But this is really to do that kind of initial investigation, to clarify the problem statement and to kind of look and consider the next steps. So there's still a lot more information that would be needed following this process. If it was to be a subsidised service, it would need to go through all the checks and balances that any other bus service would need to go through.
Thanks. I mean, it clarifies it, but in my mind, it's going, do you progress with something that would require X if we then said yes, and is X achievable? That's, I guess, the thinking of, do we progress or not? That's the piece for me.
Councillor Southworth.
So, firstly, just to check, this isn't a discussion about whether we would take it on and do it, is it? This is about City Council pursuing this and us providing some advice at this stage as to which way we might go in terms of...
Yeah, so sorry, through you, Mr Chair, for clarification. So they're seeking advice around if Environment Canterbury Council supports a proposal to review the Central City Shuttle, which is quite hard to say. After that, what we'd need to look at then is what that model would look like. If it had any level of subsidy, it would need to be contracted through an Environment Canterbury contract. As the PTA, the legislation means that we would need to hold that contract because it's got a subsidy. It would be an integral service, and obviously we would need to look at and evaluate how that fits into our existing services within the Central City. Just as a quick clarification as well, when we talk about how many services we have in the Central City, it's just over 12,000. So apologies, I know that 1,200. Did I say 12,000? That's amazing. PT Futures already. 1,200 rather than the 1,800 that we talked about in the submission. So you'll see there it talks to how many peak trips we have and how many off-peak trips. So that, in terms of the Central City, we do see that it's very, very well serviced. One of the challenges we have at the moment is that maybe people don't know how to use the service, so they may not know about the daily capping. So if you use the bus twice a day, the rest of your travel is free. So you can kind of merrily go around and using all your 1,200 scheduled bus services for free, essentially, once you've paid those two fares. And so we're going to do a marketing campaign as well, where we're going to try and help people be able to navigate around the Central City. Through the Regional Public Transport Plan as well, there was talk of a review and this was through the Greater Christchurch Partnership, the potential to review a central city zone once we've got a national ticketing solution in place. Obviously, that's not something we can confirm yet, but it's something that we could potentially consider in the future.
So in terms of the word subsidy there, and just for the city councillors who may be watching, the public who may be watching, what would the process be if they decided they wanted to fully fund it?
So it would still count as a subsidy. So essentially, we would still need to contract it, but any subsidised service becomes an integral service. It's still subsidised by ratepayers and taxpayers. So it would also count as part of our private revenue ratio as well. So So if there's any level of subsidy applied to public transport, that applies to the private revenue ratio.
Grant. Oh, sorry, Vicky, question 2. Supplementary.
So I don't mind if others want to go further. I just wanted you to know that I hadn't finished my line of questioning before it went off and on. Okay, so do we have? I don't think I've seen in this pack. There's not like a overlaid like the old route. I don't know if there. I know there's been a lot of change in the city since the old shuttle. So whether they're still thinking of following the same route or not as before, I don't know. But it'd be helpful to see what perhaps happened before, or if they've already got a preliminary idea of what route they're looking at. No, that's all right. So that would be interesting to know. And I do use public transport a lot. And whilst I acknowledge that we have all these routes and you can see them all in there, in order to get from some A's to B's, you have to go back through the interchange and come back round and out. So it actually takes quite a long time. Now, I'm a fast walker, but for people who aren't, moving between some of those places that you might want to go, if you were going to use the bus, could take a long time, particularly if some of these routes are on, like a 20-minute frequency, and then you've got others that are on the 10, and then you've got to tie in with when one comes into the interchange, you land there, and then you've got to switch out and go on to another. Like, it can take a really surprisingly long time, and if you can walk fast and mobile, you just bypass the interchange part and go to the nearest stop. But that might be, it could be 500 yards away, which isn't a big deal for me, but it is for others. And the other thing, that was the other question I was going to ask, is around the times that it runs. Because, so for example, I quite often go to the WEA, which is over near the art gallery. And in the evenings, it can feel a little bit sketchy walking around some of those areas. And certainly some of the older people that go there talk about the fact that they're heading into the interchange to get, and you're walking again quite distant. The weather's bad, etc., etc. It's not as user friendly as it could be. So I think there are some gaps in and it's not as convenient and easy. I love our bus service. I don't want to do it down at all. But I can see why, if you're trying to move around in the city centre, if you wanted people to sort of give up on their car even, I think something that links up more of those useful parts of the city in an easy to get around way could offer some benefits from my own personal experience, trying to use the buses as much as I possibly can. That's my sense of where things are. But the things that would be interesting to me, but I think, tell me if I'm wrong here, but I don't think you actually know yet, is it's perhaps what would come out of doing some investigating and going out and talking to the public, would be what's the route and what are the times? Is this going to be running into the evenings and you can get from somewhere and into the interchange without having to walk around in dark parts of the city, for example? So it's sort of, that's the important part for me.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so essentially this is looking to clarify that. So we don't have the details around what the route would look like, what the fares would look like, what the timing would be. This proposal is to do some of that preliminary work to kind of look at what's the potential for that, what might the route look like, what's the use cases, who would be wanting to utilise a central city shuttle. It's a risky thing to say, trust me. So, like the potential of what that could look like. So that's what Christchurch City Council are looking at, and that's what they've gone out within their annual plan around an investigation to kind of look at, is it even a viable idea? Is this kind of something that would work? What are the gaps in our network? Who would utilise this kind of service? What are they using it for? And then that would kind of flow into what we're suggesting here into our rest of network business case, because then we can kind of actually look at where are some of the gaps and what are some of the options and opportunities.
Really final point to that, if they go down that route, I would really, really like to see some analysis done based on gender, particularly if you're looking at later time options and things like that. Like, I think it would be great to see the different, and if there are differences in age groups and gender.
Oh, yeah.
So sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, just really quickly. So they have been out to consult as we have done on our annual plan. So if I just quickly run you through high level what the feedback has come back. So they received 477 submissions. So again, this is allocating up to 200,000 for a scoping study for a central city shuttle service. 58% supported the proposal and 42% opposed it. So the things kind of, like some of the things around the positives were the fond memories of the shuttle service. We've got the photo up there. I think a lot of people remember the yellow bus going round, and it was free at the time. Improved accessibility within central city, easier for residents and visitors to get around. Increased foot traffic in the central city would be good for businesses. And then you've got some kind of versus some commentary around unnecessary given the existing public transport options, concerns around utilisation and potential for more pressing priorities. So it's just useful to have that context as well from the community.
Right, I've got questions from Edge, Pauling, Swiggs and Mackay, and then we're going to try and get a steer here to staff regarding that final question. So, Councillor Edge, please.
Just from me, I was involved in the initial meeting in July 2022 with the Mayor, Leanne Dalziel, and Chair Huey, and I think Stuart was online as part of that discussion as well. And the upshot of that was that, there was some idea that we would develop a joint scoping exercise, but then subsequent to that, a fairly thorough report came to the council at its Air Quality Transport Urban Development meeting in September 2022. And that was explaining the pros and cons of this idea, so it's not a new idea. And I have a feeling that it was, and I couldn't find the decision of that at the subsequent meeting, which would have been early 2023. But one of the issues was not taking any further action or put it on to the incoming committee, which I don't think we did. But it seemed to me that in the background information that was provided as part of that report, and even to some extent of the things that you're saying here, that things probably really haven't changed, and there is a map within that report showing where the route was, basically going from Kilmore Street, I think, down to Morehouse Ave and to a bit of a loop up Colombo Street. But one of the things that the report says is that the conclusions of that early assessment was that a central city shuttle service would duplicate and overlap with existing and planned public transport services and infrastructure. And am I right in that situation hasn't changed?
That's correct. So when the central city shuttle used to exist, the network looked very, very different. Obviously, we've had the earthquakes, we've had big transformational change within the city. You'll see that we've put the map up in this pack, which shows the fact that the city is already covered by the existing services. So yes, that's the situation that we're in at the moment. It's not something that was brought through PT Futures. But as I say, if there is a problem identified in terms of through another scoping study, we would bring that into the rest of network review.
Just to follow up on that, and the staff noted that a free central city shuttle service was unlikely to attract central government funding for capital investment or operational support, and would therefore be fully ratepayer funded. And there was no existing budgets at the time to take a feasibility report. And one of the main issues was that our staff had a lot of work on, and I think it still has a lot of work on, and therefore some reprioritisation was going to be needed at the time. But yeah, so it didn't proceed, and I think the things that in my mind have changed since that time is the latest issue around fare recovery. And that would even be, I mean, the idea of the Central City Shuttle was that it was funded at the time by the Christchurch business community as a way of transporting people from key, that's tourists and locals, into the central city from where accommodation, near where accommodation they could connect up to.
Great, thank you, Grant. It's been 5 minutes, and I'll note that down as a negative, so you're not supporting any further scoping.
No.
Councillor Swiggs.
Okay, who would pay this scoping exercise?
So Christchurch City Council are proposing their rate to pay for this scoping exercise. So what they're seeking is, so we're not seeking Environment Canterbury Council to support what happens after that scoping exercise. Essentially what they're looking for is, do you support them putting the money into undertaking the scoping exercise?
And then that wouldn't tie up any of our staff and the other work that we've got to do, because we're asking a lot of our staff for our rest of network work. So if we said, fine, go ahead, do what you want to do, that's not going to have any impact on your work programs at this point in time?
Through you, Mr. Chair, minimal impacts. We do have the opportunity to provide some input into the scoping study, which would be a useful thing for us to do, because obviously we will get the outputs of that scoping study, and it would probably fall onto ECAN to follow what the next steps may be. And as we've said, we would include it. The logical step would seem to be included in the rest of network review. So it makes sense for us to look at making sure that we get the information we need up front. So it's a really good opportunity for us to work together.
Chair Pauling.
Kia ora koutou. Yeah, I think where I'm sitting is I think we've given pretty clear feedback to City Council through the submission process, and of course, as the background that Grant outlined, there's some pretty good background there, and there's a lot of assumptions in the what they want to do. I mean, I note in our slide pack here about if the City Council's investigation was to define a clear problem, that could be helpful. So I think it's a bit tough for us to make a decision for City Council. Like, they've gone out to do the consultation, they've come up with the project, they've heard the submissions, we haven't. I mean, ultimately they need to make the call that they need to make. But like Dion, like, those questions are helpful. Does that have an impact on us? Probably not. And ultimately it would come back to us after that to make a final decision, and then you could weigh it up properly. I think it's hard to weigh up right now. But I think we've got to keep giving the same clear feedback that there's potential duplication issues. It would have to come back to us. But at the end of the day, CCC, if you want to do the investigation and use your ratepayer money to do that, then that's what they need to face at their annual plan deliberations or at the time. But we've given the clear feedback, and I think that should remain. That feedback should be the same. But at the end of the day, it's up to them at the moment. But it'll ultimately be up to us at some point in the future. Each way there, Chair, but you know what I mean?
Clear.
Yeah, look, do we support them putting dollars in? It's a governance decision. I'm a little bit in Councillor Chair Pauling's space. It's their governance table that has got to justify that to their ratepayers. It could be a piece of work that may have some value to us in the future, or it may not. I think that for me, it's around that messaging. It suggests in our briefing papers that their staff have briefed the council. I'm presuming that we may have been part of providing some of that information. Hopefully we were, so that the correct information was provided. But yeah, I'm a bit like making sure that we our position statement or the impacts on it are well and truly clear to that council to inform them in their decision making.
That's clear, John.
Yep, I will support. It is their governance decision ultimately, but I would just like us to really clarify fare box recovery contract, all the implications, and just be very clear that just because they come back with a business case or proposal, it may not be achievable within the space. So, fair decision, but yeah, let's be just really clear about all those implications that then flow on in a decision making process.
All right, because we've come around here, we'll just wrap around this way. So I actually support it because I think it's come from the elected members, the scoping study that is. It's come from elected members. There's good support through their public annual plan submissions, and it's more study into PT, and so the scoping exercise may come out how we may imagine it to. But I agree with Craig, probably erring on the side of if that's the will of the city council, then that's their will. So, rather than us vetoing it at this point. Yeah.
He Pate Taku, just a question regarding, have they put a proposed route for it, or is it just that's going to be part of the proposed, because knowing that Colombo Street now is like all walkways and cycleways and kind of there's no bus stops anywhere, and as you said, Manchester Street is our kind of thoroughfare now. It's kind of out of the city itself. Be interested. That's what I suppose the coping study is going to look at. Yeah, I mean, just rereading our submission to their proposal. As Chair Pauline's already mentioned, especially that last paragraph. If they do choose to go ahead, scope and report of Central City Services, we recommend they work with NCTA kind of thing. So I mean, it's up to them. I'm a bit like that 2Bob kind of thing. If they want to run with it, and then we'll just see what it comes out. But it's, if it's they're paying for it, and it's a minimal impact on us. Kate Pai.
Yep, happy to support the city in investigating. As I've said already, I think there are some gaps when you start actually understanding how you link between places. Thank you.
Genevieve.
Same with myself. A lot of people have come forward and discussed this type of thing that is actually missing in the city since the removal of the past shuttle. Although it's a different service, it's similar. I think the city should scope it and cost it effectively. But yeah, good idea, and yeah.
Another bite of the apple there, Grant.
Look, I'm not really supporting it because I think the work has been done in the past in terms of duplication. Since the 2022, we've had a sign-off from all parties in the Greater Christchurch Partnership of the spatial plan, which is gearing up towards the MRT. And there was a concern that if we start to duplicate the way that people are moving through the city, does that affect the potential viability of the MRT project? But also the sheer number of, in this report, the sheer number of buses and stuff that are coming through that central city at the moment anyway. Look, if the idea was a free service, so I mean that discussion, if it has to be held with NZT, I don't think they're going to wear it. In which case, the people of Christchurch will have to just fund it themselves, presumably. But so look, I don't support. I think it'd be a waste of time myself.
David.
Always be a bit difficult being the tail end Charlie of the conversation where a lot's been said and I don't really have a lot more to add. But having said that, look, I'm probably of the mind that if the city want to pursue the investigation, that's fine. That's their prerogative. But I do support the notion that we clearly outline our position on a number of factors going forward, and just because a business case comes back and may think it's a great idea, who foots the bill, and if they want to pay for it ultimately, we'll obviously have to contract. If they want to pay us to do the job, well, that may be the outcome. But in the interim, look, if they want to commission a survey and business case on it, I'm comfortable with that, but I'm a bit nervous going forward as to the implications to us, both from a staff time and financial implications to this organisation. Yeah, I'm pretty nervous about that going forward.
Cool. So to summarise, yep, Craig. Dion.
Yeah, because I only asked questions before. I'm actually probably not very supportive, to be fair. If I put my old hat on, I represented that central city, and I know those communities who have been asking for this. We've got some issues around the Victoria neighbourhood where there's a little bit of accessibility issue, and the West End area. And it's been known for a very long time, and those areas are growing in terms of the population. But what I know is that when they do this little case thingy, it's going to come in and the answer's we already know what the answer effectively is. We've got to do a rest of network business case to understand the whole network. We've got communities elsewhere in the city crying out for services where we've got growth areas. We can't do it all. Now, why I'm erring on the saying I don't really support them doing it is because it will set an expectation of those communities that we will deliver something, and then we're the bad guys. So I'm not really willing for that to happen, to be fair. But it sounds like there's probably more support, but I just needed to say that because they will, once it gets done, they land a business case, there will be an expectation that we do it.
Yes, Sonia.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, just to clarify, they're not planning to do a full business case process. It's just a kind of initial scoping and investigation. But I take your point, definitely, that there always is that risk when you go out to consult with the community that we raise their expectations that it will result in a new service or change.
Craig, quickly.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, I was going to mention earlier on the rest of network business case review. But I think that is really important in the context. So again, I think that's got to be part of our feedback. But it sort of does, from our deliberations on our annual plan and obviously some of the issues that we do know about in Selwyn and others, it's an interesting case study, isn't it, about how a district council could do something and even help us in understanding stuff and using their own district rates to look at different types of services, because I think that is an interesting space. We did raise that at our deliberations. We did put some money towards those sorts of things. So I just think that's interesting in the perspective of this, and the rest of network business review. Network review is the one that we really need to focus on. And just the other thing as part of our feedback would be, a bit like Grant said, that obviously we've been focusing on other critical needs, and as Dion's just brought up. So like I said before, it's ultimately their decision. They need to make the call, but I think we've got to give that strong and clear message that we already have given and back that up with the stuff that Grant's raised about the previous work, etc. together. But that's their decision. Yeah.
Clear, last one.
So, yeah, just the context I think really is important, and I think it is around, you could bring the winner up a raised there by Councillor Swiggs of raising expectations. If it went on further and they'd put public funding in, would that impact the PPR? It would. Yeah. So that's that's a real worry. But at a higher level, from a governance perspective, I still think it's their decision.
So sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, just to clarify. So any public transport service that requires a subsidy, be that a taxpayer, be that a local ratepayer, will mean that it's counted as part of that private revenue ratio. So even if it was to be 100% funded through, let's say we could do it through Christchurch City Council, but we have to contract it, that would still count as private revenue.
But would they back count it? Would they then go back and look at that initial funding for the scoping exercise, for example? No.
Sorry, is the question, just to clarify, would they consider how much it costs to do the investigation, or?
Yes. So if it proceeded and it landed in our transport model, or actual, would they actually then go back and look at that initial early investigation stuff or not? No.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can't say for certain, but I don't see that they would, and it would be such a small portion in terms of the funding. So,
Okay, so to summarise, I think that there is the mood of the room to endorse the scoping study, to remain neutral on the broader idea of the shuttle. Is that, of course, there's negativity in the room, but on the whole, there was support for there was an endorsement for the scoping. Yeah.
But in the end, it's up to it's their decision, right? So it doesn't matter
Yep.
what we say.
Well, yeah. Well, the question is here, but so is it clear for you guys what we've come away with?
So through you, Mr. Chair. So we do have Christchurch City Council obviously listening in at the moment process. Would you like us to respond, or I guess we're throwing it out there in the potential for elected members to have a conversation with Christchurch City Council counterparts?
I'm happy to pick it up. Craig too.
I mean, I think we should write something up for sure, and maybe between myself and Dion and Joe, we can get that across to City Council. Yeah, but I've heard the feedback, so but we should just follow it up with something. Yeah.
Great. So thank you, Sonia, Stuart, and Giles, for your time, and thank you for what you do for us.
Yeah, I agree. I think having letter from staff and explaining those bigger picture things about